welcome everyone. Great having everyone here. Lots of folks today. Had to add a new table, so I'm very far away from the Zoom conversation now. But that's the way this goes. And so we are continuing our looking at this book, Vanishing Grace. We are in section 2, which is the chapters that are titled Pilgrims, Activists, and Artists. For those of you that read, remember you don't have to read, but for those of you who have read, a lot of you have been reading and talking about how much you've been enjoying it. So we're adding this question there. Was there anything in that section that you thought that stood out to you, that you thought was interesting, that you feel would be beneficial for the group to hear?
I always had a feeling about the term evangelical.
Okay.
Coming from
like evangelize or like good news?
Rural Georgia.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And what I like about this author is that he tells about the negativity that we encounter, but he gives you positivity within that.
Yeah.
And, just this example, I didn't make it to the last chapter, but just this example of going into a South American country, and the area was not a very good area. It's a very bad area.
Yeah.
So much so that they had people on patrol with semi-automatic.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that he labeled himself, and that brought about trust. So maybe people in other countries don't see us quite the way, maybe are not quite as judgmental, in some countries anyway, as we are here.
Yeah. I think it all depends on where you are and what's going on. And I like how you put that. Like he threads a very specific needle where he is dismantling forces that are inside of our faith groups, which are unhelpful, forces that are inside of us that may be unhelpful, but also giving examples of things that are helpful, which I think is good. And that's what makes this book so powerful. Like this book really is just nothing but stories, like just little stories of different groups that kind of fall into this. And I think it's helpful to read those, and it helps to reorient our lives from, we may be doing things that are less helpful to more. And so, yeah.
And to that point, that's what turns us off so much on the news.
Yeah.
They give you all of these scenarios where there is conflict and issues, and it's so they don't necessarily.
If it bleeds, it leads.
To find the positivity or a way to achieve positivity.
Yeah.
And he does.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So that's Philip Yancey's good stuff. But yeah, like the news cycle. Man, this is back pre-pandemic. I remember we'd talk to people in the Bible study, and there was like, but it seems like everything's just going to hell in a handbasket type of thing. The world around us, and I would always say, like, we have less people hungry now than we did 30 years ago. Like it may not always see that, but that's not the stuff that's going to get coverage. There's still awful things all around us, but if we allow the cycle to come in that everything is just getting worse, it'll eat you alive, and you'll become cynical and all those things. And cynical people normally aren't the ones that are bringing flowers to a situation, And so like we have to always be careful about becoming cynical, and it's easy to become it. It's like when you look at how the world looks like it's affecting us, it's easy to become cynical and jaded and all that. So that was a good observation. It's a good observation.
Speaking of cynical, I kept thinking, reading his writing, is he cynical or realistic, or both?
Well, I don't think he's so much cynical, but I think so. Philip Yancey. What I like about Philip Yancey is his story is shades of my own story follow through his. He was in Georgia and in some very fundamentalist churches, and had very strong negative experiences in those churches, and kind of just left the church for a while. And he came back, and what kind of brought him back is the stuff he's talking about in here. Like, he started seeing these other people doing things in the name of Jesus, and all of those things that were good. And he started doing this. His first real book was The Jesus I Never Knew. And it is a college level book about Jesus. Like, I had to read it in college. Had is a strong word for what I did, but but that, it was on our list for our college course. And it's a great book, and encourage any one of you to read it. But it kind of goes through that story of Jesus, where and it kind of dismantles all these things that we sometimes feel like Jesus was all about. We're going to talk about some of that when we do the Bible portion today, but that it's actually Jesus, is usually kind of focused on grace and the least of these, and all of this stuff, and not so much. He's not the police that's like, did you pray this much today? Did you give this amount and all that stuff? He's not really that, So I would say that he's a realist when it comes to the situations, but he also is offering hope. And so yeah. Was there anything else?
I think one of the things that stood out for me was the aid workers, the medical aid workers that were in Muslim country,
Mm-hmm.
and they had to sign a thing that they won't share their faith or anything, or they'll get arrested or kicked out. And they're Christians, and they are just loving the people and creating a place where these refugees can stay. And the one said, I have never felt closer to Jesus than with this work I'm doing.
Yeah.
Because they're just loving the people. And that made me think, well, it's not about loving them so you can convert them.
Yeah.
That's not, it's just loving them, and how freeing that is. And then it does take the law away from it.
Yeah.
Love them so that you can, that's not our job. I just really like, whoa, that was kind of.
Yeah. That's a great example, because I think people can sense the desperation on us a lot of the times when we're just trying to get people in, and it's so freeing when you're like, everything's fine.
Yeah.
Like and I think, like, when you have that disposition about you, then you become more attractive, like I liken it to high school dating, right? Like, you wanted nothing to do with the person that's constantly like, what are you going to do? Like, are you going to go out? Like all that. But the person that's more aloof, you're just like, like the challenge type of thing, and just like, if you're confident, I think you're more attractive, and not confident in like, I got to make sure everything changes here, but just like, I'm okay, so that's kind of my thing. That's a good point. That's a good
Along
point.
with that, I liked when he said that we should not see ourselves as superiors helping inferiors, or faithful saving unfaithful.
Yeah.
Because then we're putting ourselves above them.
Yeah.
And then we're not going to have that loving attitude.
Yeah, that's such a good example. Such a good example. And it's hard to get there, because for a lot of us, it's this divide between believers and not believers. It's this divide between, like, lost and saved type of idea that we have, and it's hard to, like, look at things outside of that.
Like the parable of the rich man.
Rich man, yeah.
Say, what do I have to do? Give up your stuff.
Yeah, give it up. Well, and going back to Tracy's story, you see, like, when they're in that situation, they have to give up their stuff and just help, and that's when they start seeing God, is when they, like, over there. And I'll say this about my past church, when that church was the least invested in trying to save people, when that church was the least interested in trying to get converts, we just wanted to help and were involved in helping and all that stuff, two things happened. All right, two things happened. One, we started inviting people into membership that had no affiliation with the church whatsoever before that. They were not transfers, all that stuff. These were people that were new. They may have gone to church when they were little. This is America. That's most people, but it was just, they were all of a sudden around. And all these people were doing just baptisms like crazy and all this stuff. And at the same time, the righteous got very angry at it. So like that's, yeah. So like that's, Like I did 2 new member classes that were 80% people from not from that congregation. Like is wild. It was wild.
I can hear Cyndi Lauper singing True Colors.
Yeah. And a year later I was here. like that. That's like that. That's because some people got angry. And so, this is the way it goes. The way it goes. No one has personally attacked me here yet.
Email you. You keep attacking people from Michigan. Watch what you say about Pennsylvania.
So, all right. So good deal. So but I think that's, those are great. I'm amazed at the amount of people that have enjoyed this book as much as they have, because we kind of put it out there. It's like, hey, you can read it if you want to.
It's deep.
Yeah. So like,
red lines and stuff.
Yeah.
2 pages.
Yeah. And so it's a good book. It's a good book, and so it's we're actually looking at doing something like this again next year. But yeah. Well, let's start off with our video. It's about 21 minutes long, and it's pretty good. I don't know if it's as good as last week's, but it's way better than the first week's. All those things. Let me make.
I worked on, for organizations that were collecting information and spreading the word about every hideous thing human beings could do to one another. And I just got more and more probably cynical and in despair about the unlikelihood of there being any possibility of a good God. I didn't think there was a God, because if there was, certainly perhaps we could have done something about the child who'd been killed slowly in front of a mother, or the amputation, or the hanging, or the burning alive that we'd just been hearing about.
First Peter 4:10 sets out a clear mission statement for Christians. It goes like this: each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others, faithfully administering God's grace in its various forms. I like that because it shows that all of us are called to use our unique gifts to administer God's grace. I use the term grace dispensers. That's what we Christians are called to do: dispense grace. We've received the gift of grace from God, and out of gratitude, we give it away to others. In my career as a Christian writer, I've encountered three types of people who I believe make effective grace dispensers in the modern world, especially in a secular, even post-Christian world. They are activists, artists, and pilgrims. I want to introduce you to a couple of them and explain what makes them so effective in communicating faith. First, activist. From the theologian Miroslav Volf, I learned a new way to communicate faith. We used to express what we believe in concepts, he said, from head to head. I believe something, so I tell you, this is what you should know. Well, more and more, that's not working so well. We live in a diverse world with a lot of competing truth claims, and you may well run into a brick wall if you try that approach. Instead, Miroslav Volf proposes a different pattern. He says you can go from hand to heart and then head. We reach out with our hands to do acts of mercy and kindness. We dispense grace. That touches someone's heart. Why did you do this, they ask. Why did you care about me? And at that point, they're open to head beliefs. I saw that pattern vividly at work in Japan 1 year after the tsunami that killed 20,000 people and devastated a large region. Christians from the United States and Europe had quit their job, moved to Japan, and volunteered for agencies like Samaritan's Purse and Habitat for Humanity. They went to rebuild houses for the Japanese. They weren't trying to proselytize. But as the Japanese saw their love, hands of mercy reaching out, their hearts were touched, and they wanted to know why. Because we're followers of Jesus, and we're here to express God's love for you. Before turning over the keys to a new house, these Christians had one request. Do you mind if we pray a blessing on this house? Trust me, nobody refused. Now I want you to meet a person who was drawn to faith when she saw Christians reaching out their hands of mercy to oppressed people, especially those caught up in human trafficking. Holly Burkhalter was an idealist. She worked for the U.S. Congress and then with several human rights organizations. She cared about the weak and vulnerable, although not because of her Christian faith, at least at first. It's a fascinating story of being drawn to faith by seeing Christians care for suffering people. She wrote about it in a book with a title that says it all: Good God, Lousy World, and Me.
Well, I was a non-Christian in my really long years in the human rights field, but I almost think I didn't want to be an atheist. But I mean, if it were a done deal, really, I was perfectly convinced there was no God, then why would I still be troubled by that? You know, why would I wake up and literally curse God every day? Like, thanks a lot for that. It's like this: you can either believe in a good and sovereign God, or you can believe in the Holocaust, in what happened in the Holocaust, but you can't believe in both of those things simultaneously. And that's where I was at. It's like, how could both of those things be true? And then I think the Rwanda genocide of 1994, where that was the Holocaust on my watch, and 100,000 people died pitilessly in 100 days, and the churches were nowhere, and the maximum number of Rwandans died in churches where they had gone to seek shelter, and there was none. And I was so bitter. I just thought there couldn't possibly be a God. And then I met somebody who believed in God, who knew as much about the Rwanda genocide as I did, more actually, who'd investigated the Rwanda genocide, and who, as a Christian, came back from investigating the Rwanda genocide and decided he, as a Christian, wanted to do something about violence. And that is Gary Haugen, who founded International Justice Mission. Rwanda's a very Christian country. They must have prayed as they waited to be killed. And I was angry at him for believing. And I said, why did God let that happen? And he said, and I don't remember many things, but I remember this and I always will. He said, I don't know why the Rwanda genocide happened, but I know that this is not all God has in mind for all of those little ones who perished, and that he will wipe every tear from their eye. So I just was so taken with that. He was so certain that there was a better story, and that we weren't seeing all of the story, and that the corpses and the skeletons and the tiny little skulls was not the end of the story. He was dead certain about that. And he didn't try to explain the rest because it doesn't have an explanation. But it was really the beginning of a journey I didn't even know I was on. An I.J. Emmer, who became a very close friend of mine, and really, I think, as much a spiritual mentor as anyone, a woman named Sharon, and she said, Gary's going to be preaching at my church, and you want to come hear him? And I said, sure, I like Gary. And what he brought was scripture about all over the place, Old Testament, New Testament, up one side and down the other. God telling his people out loud and in English, hates injustice and wants his people to do something about it. And don't be looking around for anybody else. It's us. And that's the whole foundation of IJM, but I hadn't ever really heard it like that or heard it at all. I just knew Gary was a Christian that wanted to do something about violence. But the idea that God has a job for people who love him all of a sudden opened up a new way to think for me. Because remember, my kind of toxic little mantra was you can believe in a good sovereign God or you can believe in the Holocaust, but not both. But there's a third choice now. It just came to me just like that. There's a third option. That God saw all of that, was heartbroken, hated that. And I don't know, I just never knew that before. And it really did dismantle the intellectual barriers that I'd really quite productively and meticulously been creating against belief. Huge numbers of Christians are involved in caring for needy people with regard to hunger and homelessness and HIV, AIDS, and, in charity. And I think that, from all the studies that Christians give overwhelmingly more than their peers. And interestingly, the poorer you are, the larger percentage of your income Christians tend to give away. People were surprised to find that I became a Christian because I wasn't for so long. And but I also think that people are also surprised and quite delighted, including people who have no faith whatsoever, to see this Christian organization that's entered the international human rights battle and are glad for it. I'm really very excited about what I see particularly in a generation of very active young people who are just hungry to serve, to make a difference, to act on their faith. And I think there's a lot of change going on in churches of all denominations. And it's a great time to be alive and a great time to be a Christian.
I've been to Holly's office at the International Justice Mission, and it's an amazing operation. At the Justice Mission headquarters, you'll find an army of bright young attorneys who begin every single day with prayer because they believe they're doing God's work in the world. The world takes notice. International Justice Mission has been featured in places like The New Yorker, Forbes magazine, The New York Times, as well as on Oprah, CNN, and NBC. Truly, the broader culture listens to activists who demonstrate their faith by reaching out their hands to help the needy. The second group of people who communicate well are artists. Of course, the church has a long history of nurturing artists. If you visit Europe, you see museums stuffed with artwork that came out of the church. The great works by artists like Michelangelo were commissioned by the church. The same is true in music and in literature. Dante, Shakespeare, Tolstoy, Charles Dickens, you can't read them without picking up the Christian background out of which they wrote. I've got a special feeling for this group of people because it was art that brought me back to faith. I grew up in unhealthy churches, and I learned to shut out the words. That head-to-head communication wasn't working for me. God spoke to me in more indirect ways through music and then books. Art comes along gently, alongside. It's less threatening. When I pick up a book, I'm in control. No one is shouting at me, preaching at me. If I don't like it, I can just shut the book. And it was books from people like C.S. Lewis and Frederick Buechner that brought me back to faith. Art did its work. Makoto Fujimura is a contemporary artist who has a vision for seeing the church once again become a nurturer of art. He works out of a studio in Manhattan and in New Jersey. He's at the very top of his field. And Mako leads an organization that encourages other Christians in the arts.
You know, when you follow Christ, you do offend a lot of the established sensibilities, and you feel alone. But I found soon enough that, you know, Christ goes before you, ahead of you, that God sets the tone of your journey. However alone you feel, you're not alone. So International Arts Movement began out of that belief that I'm not alone, that there are others out there who care about their craft and art, who want to be the best they can, and yet they're also serious about their faith. As a family, we became ground zero residents in 9/11. We lived 3 blocks away from the towers. Our kids went to public school two blocks away, and didn't know what happened to them for a couple hours. And we were spared that day. And my studio mate and I, we had a studio 10 blocks north of the towers, within the ground zero area that was sequestered. You know, so you had to show your ID to get in. And so after 9/11, we couldn't work. And so we decided to use this space that we just got to expand the studio as a place to host people, just have a conversation with local artists and neighbors. I've never felt this sense of community as much as I did then. We began this project called Tribe Contemporary that really honored the memories, but artists were it's artist initiated, that we organized, curated, we created poetry readings, happenings, just spontaneous. And this was all happening within Ground Zero, so very few people knew about it. But it was a very special time where all these components kind of came together in a sense that's out of this communal reality, and art became part of that healing process. And we learned a lot during that process. Most importantly, the relationship that I was able to build with local artists and community leaders that came and used the space as a place of refuge to feel like they were connecting with something deeper, and ultimately it became a beautiful place. So when Jesus talks about consider the lilies of the field, they neither toil or spin, but even Solomon didn't have the glory and beauty of them. And they're so spindly that they can be thrown into the fire and burnt, to start a fire. We need to consider the lilies first, and to ponder if our existence, which is absolutely gratuitous, it's unnecessary for God, but He has made us part of this co-creation of His world. And therefore art, music, theater, poetry, and dance exist as one of the ways that we can behold, tap into, and to inhabit this gratuitous reality that God has created.
Mako is modest. He's actually the only American to master a Japanese style of painting that dates back 6 centuries, which he's adapted into more modern forms. And one year, he was commissioned to do the White House Christmas card. Mako's organization brings together Christian artists in many fields every year for a conference in New York. They've even had performances at Carnegie Hall. They're making waves. The final category of grace dispensers is what I call pilgrims. Post-Christians don't respond well to somebody who stands on a platform and preaches at them. In fact, they'd never enter a church in the first place. They need to hear that those of us who are Christians are just like they are. We're all stumbling along, trying to find our way. We fight the same temptations. We have the same questions. We're plagued by the same doubts. There's one key difference. We have a clear destination in mind. When people ask me about my writing, I like to say that I'm an ordinary pilgrim in the pew. I'm not a pastor. I'm not a theologian. I'm a pilgrim. And when I tackle a topic like prayer or Jesus or grace, I do so with the stance of a pilgrim. I look for help from people who've gone before and have found some insight and answers that I can learn from. My wife and I live in Colorado, and we like to climb the mountains there. In fact, we have climbed all 54 of the Colorado mountains above 14,000 feet. In the process, I'll admit, sometimes we've gotten lost. And I've got to tell you, it's a panicky feeling to be that high with no markers around you, with weather moving in, not knowing where you are. And then off in the distance, I'll see another hiker, and I'll yell for help. He or she will come over, maybe unfold a map and point out where we are and where our destination is. I tell you, that's a relief. And for me, that's a picture of so many people around us. They're simply lost, unsure of why they're living, what's important in life, where they're headed, what their destination is. It takes a fellow pilgrim to come alongside and to show the way. Trust me, if you're lost and somebody comes alongside with a map, that feels like good news. Christians aren't an elite club. We're not a superior class of human beings. We're simply people who have encountered the grace of God, and we want to give it away. We want to share the love and forgiveness that we've experienced, and also the guidance that we've received from the Bible. We believe that God intends the very best life for us. We know the destination and the goal. That's something worth sharing, and it's something that everybody can do. Remember Peter's words. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others, faithfully administering God's grace in its various forms.
What kind of a world would you create if you don't need it? For God, it meant a place of beauty, place of gratuitous love, place where shalom, reigns in all living things that he created. And that is the world that art can capture today.
Okay, and we're back. All right. So, anything stand out to you? Find anything encouraging, interesting, anything like that? Yeah, Cheryl?
When he said our existence is unnecessary to God.
Yeah.
Oh.
So, in what way did that make you go, whoa?
I think God created us for a purpose.
Okay.
And I think that we are to envelop his ideas, his spirit, his love, and everything to handle and progress through tasks that equal that purpose, but I can't imagine God creating a world without something to help others.
Yeah.
And I think
well, and I think his gratuitous word was interesting there. Yeah, it's just like an extravagance to it all, which I think is an interesting way of looking at it. Yeah. Was it, did anyone else have anything?
And a way to work through all the adversity.
Yeah.
Because that's often what you're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
You're not sitting around in Bible study after all. Is to stay laser focused on the purpose, the intent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
God's grace.
Yeah. Did anyone else have anything? That was
just watch people.
Watch people? Now, what do you mean by that?
Find someone who needs your help and just quietly help them.
Okay. Yeah. And that's So let's see. Last night I asked this question. I don't think anyone knew what I was talking about. Let's see if I can do it better. So think about your own experiences in your own life. What are the 3 types of grace dispensers, be it the activist, artist, or pilgrim, have influenced you the most? And what was it about that influenced you?
Chatting today.
Yeah, you're chatting.
Making up for lost time. I have to tell you, working in public health in rural Georgia, I worked in Osceola County, which was featured on Time magazine in the 80s as having the highest per capita AIDS infected population. And I was in there, in those public health departments, working with the babies and working alongside my coworkers. And to take that to today, the people that are in health, they are some of the greatest grace dispensers out there. I'm telling you. So not everyone's good, but I know in the 14, 15 years that I worked in public health, I saw many nutritionists come and go, and some of them were the pretty little blondes and mama's girls, and they couldn't handle it. And some were the soccer moms, and they couldn't handle it. And some were truly concerned about their risk, because this is when AIDS was just, hitting the fan. So there's grace workers out there, and they may not be talking about Christ, but they are living their lives through Christ.
Yeah. That's good. Was there anything else?
A nurse.
A nurse?
When I was actually a nursing student. When I was 14, I was in a vehicle accident. A car turned in front of me while I was riding my bicycle home from school in a rainstorm. And when I went to the hospital, I was not expected to survive. There was a student nurse working in the emergency room who that day and the next day skipped all of her classes, did not sleep, went with me to my room and stayed with me and held my hand. And I just could not get over that. That was a true activist who was very quiet.
Yeah.
Angel of mercy.
Yeah. Those are great stories, and that's those. I really like his terminology of activists and artists and pilgrims, because those are all different things that we need at different times. That's Kevin and I were talking about something earlier, and something I kind of talked about being kind of pilgrimash earlier in the last church when we weren't so concerned about that, but just pointing out a direction. And when you kind of become like that, you start finding yourself around people because you're safe, you know. And something that I've really come to realize, I may have said it last week, but I really tell people now that the faith is like a circle, and that we're kind of traveling in towards the middle, and that middle is Christ's death and resurrection. You know, the Trinity is there in the middle, and we're traveling there. But the thing is, you know, this is my experience over here. You may be over here, which means that you're going to be traveling a different direction towards the middle. You know, and if I expect you to travel exactly the same direction that I'm going, you're going to go, I'm going to be sending you away type of thing. And I think that's what helps as the pilgrims. It's kind of like what Philip Yancey said when he's on the mountain and someone says, here's your destination and all that stuff. You know, that you can point to the direction to something rather than like, this is everything that you need, you know, and that ends up giving kind of life to people. And it's amazing being around people and seeing that give life. Yeah. You look like you wanted to say something.
I got one about the arts, you know.
Yeah.
I can think of one picture that really gets to you. It's the scream.
Yeah.
You know, it looks like an E.T. with a big mouth.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's just, it hits you.
Yeah. Yeah. I talked about Van Gogh last week, right? Like I think I was in this class. I talked about Van Gogh. But yeah, like art has had a profound effect on, like you're talking about the scream and how it's like saying something real.
I'm not talking about the guy with the pitchfork and his wife there, you know.
Yeah.
Norman Rockwell one.
No.
That gets me, but in a different way.
Yeah.
Well, and that, I think it's Max Ernst did the screen, but on that bridge that he painted, that there's a bridge, and he stood there for a long time ready to kill himself, and he didn't.
Oh yeah. Like it's saying something realer than what you could say, like just in with actual words. You know, in that art, because that's how you feel sometimes.
Yeah. When you talk about art, I think of not just painting, but I think of music largely, which being hard of hearing has a big effect on me when I can really hear and understand and know what they're saying. And within the past 10 years, my main favorite song has changed to I Can Only Imagine. If you've seen that movie, I mean, that's way up at the top of the list for those two. And to know what that young man went through and how he ended up writing that song and the struggle. And that had an effect on regenerating my feeling toward, I guess, different ways of looking at faith than I had before.
Yeah.
I think sometimes teachers too. I know when I went to college, went to Concordia, and like most young kids, I was struggling with some of my faith things. And I had one prof that just opened up the world to me. And since then, as I've gone on, sometimes, you get kind of bogged down sometimes. And I'll just happen to go to a Bible class, and it's just what I needed to hear every time. So a lot of teachers and pastors help out in that way also.
Yeah, kind of help along the journey, and that's I mean, I look back at my life, you're going through, and there's definite people along the way that have nudged, pointed, all these things that have led me to where I am now, and I could name a few of those. Like there's probably a few I can't, type of thing. So yeah, it's this affects even us, and it's really encouraging to us even as we go forward. Did anyone have anything else before we go forward?
I think our parents.
Yeah.
Especially if you have Christian parents.
Yeah.
They play a big role probably in all of those areas.
They do. They do. They do. They do. It's true. And so like we have these people that are nudging us and moving us forward. So we'll go into the Bible study part of here. We're going to be in Matthew chapter 25. We're going to spend some time in there. Matthew chapter 25. And I think it's interesting that the one lady that, I can't remember her name right now, I'm awful with names, but she was the activist part. She worked for the international mission. And she said that one guy brought in, when she listened to the one guy preach, that it was all this stuff about how God hates injustice and all these things. And in our scripture today, like I remember when I first was introduced to this story, it's the sheep and the goats. Like I was told that the whole point of this whole thing is it's telling you that there really is a hell, and that's all that was involved in it. Like that's I look back at that now and I'm like, that's kind of an odd way of looking at it. Like that's like that. So we'll read that here in a second, but like if you remember the thing that we our gospel reading from Sunday is Jesus, stood up with the scroll and read from Isaiah, and it says all these things about Spirit of the Lord is on me, proclaim good news to the poor, sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners, recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free. Like it's like this way of Jesus of taking grace to other people is integral to the story, and so what I would like to do is we don't have a ton of time, but we're going to spend it, and we're going to read the story right before sheep and the goats and the one that is the sheep and the goats. So we're going to read both of those, and I'll give you verses here in a second. So let me share the screen again here, and hit share. And let's see here. Is it the talents? Yeah. So we'll read starting with 14. We'll go to the end of the chapter. Here we go.
For the kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling to a far country, who called his own servants and delivered his goods to them. And to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to each according to his own ability, and immediately he went on a journey. Then he who had received the 5 talents went and traded with them, and made another 5 talents. And likewise, he who had received 2 gained 2 more also. But he who had received 1 went and dug in the ground and hid his Lord's money. After a long time, the Lord of those servants came and settled accounts with them. So he who had received 5 talents came and brought 5 other talents, saying, Lord, you delivered to me 5 talents. Look, I have gained 5 more talents besides them. His Lord said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. He also, who had received 2 talents, came and said, Lord, you delivered to me 2 talents. Look, I have gained 2 more talents besides them. His Lord said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. Then he who had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered seed. And I was afraid, and went and hid your talent in the ground. Look, there you have what is yours. But his Lord answered and said to him, You wicked and lazy servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown, and gather where I have not scattered seed. So you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers, and at my coming I would have received back my own with interest. So take the talent from him, and give it to him who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. and cast the unprofitable servant into the outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
All right, before we go on, I want to say a couple words. And I know you guys on Zoom can't see me, but we're in the section that is very apocalyptic. Like there's all these apocalyptic type of things. So you got to put yourself into apocalypse readings here. But also notice that those other ones that were given to the talents were investing them rather than just hoarding. And let that inform you as we go into the sheep and the goats.
When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the holy angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them one from another, as a shepherd divides his sheep from the goats. And he will set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on the left. Then the king will say to those on his right hand, "Come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." Then the righteous will answer him, saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you a stranger and take you in, or naked and clothe you? Or when did we see you sick or in prison and come to you?" And the king will answer and say to them, "Assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did it to one of the least of these, my brethren, you did it to me." Then he will also say to those on the left hand, "Depart from me, you cursed, into the everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you did not take me in, naked, and you did not clothe me, sick, and in prison, and you did not visit me." Then they also will answer him, saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison, and did not minister to you?" Then he will answer them, saying, "Assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me." And these will go away into everlasting punishment, but the righteous into eternal life.
Okay, so with the idea of it being an apocalypse chapters, a couple chapters there, and kind of looking at that parable that came before it, because you got to read this stuff in order, type of thing. Like, how does that hit you? Like, what's going on in there? What's happening? Because there's a lot of emotions rolling around in this one. So what?
Well, who decides who's going to be the sheep or going to be the goats? That's right off the bat, you know.
Who decides?
Yeah.
Like, what do you want to say to that?
Well, in a political sense, maybe it might be the people I don't want who are going to judge me as goat.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Okay.
Wait a minute. I might not like that.
Yeah. Well,
on the other hand, I don't want to be a goat.
Yeah, I don't want to be. So that's
It's kind of a dichotomy there, you know.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Go ahead.
And what's the matter with goats?
What's
I love that.
I've never taken those two together, but when you read them together like that and think of them as the same story, he's just kind of explaining what the talents are. And to me, that's kind of what I took.
What the investment is.
What the investment is, that you're using, you're investing your gifts into other people. That's loving, basically. You're investing your love, and then people see that and come to Christ, like you're just saying. And so those both, and I think this is probably but that the guy with 10 got 10, the guy with 2 got 2. It's not the number that you get. Yeah. They're both good and faithful servants because they invested their talents. And then the goats are the guys that they don't serve anybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's grace dispensing.
Yeah, the grace dispensing.
Yeah. Yeah, they're the ones that don't do it. So are they all then followers of Christ, but the ones that don't share their love are denying that the love?
Yeah, kind of denying. It's almost like they're burying it.
They're being the Pharisees.
Yeah. Lee.
Well, no, again, the sheep with the shepherd, and basically those who are sharing are the sheep, and the shepherd will take care of the sheep. Yeah.
Like, and so you're seeing that dichotomy there, and something that kind of came out to me is I have a very strong. It's strengthened as I study the scriptures more. The sense of let's see, what was happening last night? Oh, Ed Scott, the retired pastor, comes on the Wednesday group, and he was saying, we say it every Sunday in the Lord's Prayer. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And it's like when we're asking ourselves in those, like, what do we want God? What does God's kingdom look like? Well, it's all that list there, that the hungry are being fed, those that feel alone in prison are being visited, and that's all those things. And he said, I thought this was astute. It's like the other way we're saying is kind of like my will be done type of thing, and that's everything Tracy was just saying, and that's and kind of what Lee was saying too is that the shepherd is watching over the sheep and all that stuff. So I want to add another little wrinkle to this because let me continue going on with that thought. That if we're bringing God's will and all of that in, it's almost like we're bringing heaven into the world. So, which I think is kind of what we pray in the Lord's Prayer, like, King, Lord, come down type of thing. And so if we aren't doing that, we're kind of bringing our own hellishness onto ourselves, which is kind of a interesting way of looking at it. Like it's like, and if you remember, we did the C.S. Lewis book, Great Divorce, not too long ago, and the hell was a place where you get everything you want. You just that's what it was, and that's why it was just ghettos, because everyone can get what they want. They don't have to resolve any conflicts or anything. Now think about this. I've been burying the lead on this whole thing. If you were a good student on here, you would have looked at what comes right after this. What do you remember? What comes right after this? It's the arrest of Jesus. It's that whole narrative, and you think about what's going on in that narrative. Like, you have denial of Peter, but we just know what Peter's going on because the story centers around Peter. But all those other disciples ran. We don't know what ways they denied, and all those there. And there's no one there for Jesus, right? And yet he still saves the lot of them, along with he's saving us.
Well, I think too, in this whole, goat and shepherd and sheep, that we always strive to do the best and be sheep, but all of us become goats.
Okay.
And we all invest. But then we're sinners, so we hide our treasures, in the grace of God.
Yeah. It's not just what I'm hearing from you. It's not like a light switch that that it goes back and forth, and like it's like a dimmer, right? Like that's but the beautiful thing about the story is that whatever you've done for these, you've done for me, and it goes back to what Tracy said at the beginning. Like the people that were in the Muslim country, it's almost like they stopped trying to have a goal to it besides just helping people, and it's almost like they saw that was serving Christ more than what it was before that, which is an interesting thought. It's interesting. Lee, you look like you want to say something again.
No.
Okay.
I'm thinking.
You look pensive. No, you look pensive. So
When I think of the goat and the sheep, I think of the goats, they'll eat anything.
they'll eat it.
And the sheep want to follow you.
Yeah, I feel attacked on that.
I hate to put closure on this, but
Yeah.
I had one thought about the person with the one talent.
Yeah.
Must not have been a Missouri Synod Lutheran.
Oh, really?
He would have taken his money and put it in the church extension fund.
Oh, yeah, he put it in the church. That's where he would have buried it, in the church extension fund?
At least he could have helped something.
Could have created new churches. Like, let's list off the propaganda of Jay Wedland and church extension funds. Yeah. Like, but no, like, that's a story that really changed me. And I think you can see those pilgrims, activists, and artists kind of in that, where it's like how is the serving going on? And like you said, like many of us have said, there's people in our own lives that we have realized that have led us along, and I'm sure that we have haphazardly have guided people along their paths too.
When you say that the love, the grace, showing the grace, and just using your hands brings heaven.
Yeah.
Think how much heaven that can be for you when you don't judge.
Yeah.
And you don't, you do all of those when you're not doing that, when you're just loving.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't have to worry about anything else.
Yeah.
That's the gift God gave us if we could only do it.
And you see the early church in Acts is so strong in that. They're so strong, trying to fulfill needs around them, and it gives them opportunities to be like, hey, here's the story of the resurrection and the crucifixion, resurrection of Jesus, all through Old Testament and on up. Like it's giving them those opportunities in that. So yeah, like it's cool stuff. It's cool stuff. Yeah. So was there anything else? We actually kind of stayed on time. That's good. That's good. Well, let me say goodbye to the YouTube post watchers and all that stuff. So thanks for watching. There'll be another one next week. All right.